use of dramatic monologue. He makes use of symbolism, lyricism, lucidity of expression, simplicity of language, and the medieval imagery. The imagery is full of color, glamour, splendor. In Browning's poem, you find irony, but in Rossetti's poem, you find sensuousness, mysticism, and the musical element is found in a controlled manner. Rossetti treats beauty, love, color, glamour, splendor, opulence in a sensuous manner. There is also beauty, love, and spirituality in the poems of Rossetti. So this is how Rossetti used to write poems, and he was a great Pre-Raphaelite, and he was the founder of Pre-Raphaelite school of poetry. Now we will study the modern poetry. What are the characteristic features of modern poetry? What is the background of modern poetry? Uh, while taking a cursory glance at the characteristic features of modern poetry, you will notice a few important characteristics. They are: there is moral rigidity in modern poetry. Morality is given a lot of importance in modern poetry. And there is also sentimentality of the Victorians. The Victorians used sentimentality in their poetry. In modern poetry also you find sentimentality and moral rigidity. Moreover, how do you define the modern age? Modern age is especially defined by the two world wars. The First World War, which occurred in 1914, began in 1914 and ended in 1918. And the Second World War began in 1939 and ended in 1945. So these two world wars, they devastated the life and society, the human culture, the human social life, the economy of the states was totally shattered. So it was really a very devastating war. These two world wars are devastating world wars, and they impacted very severely the socio-cultural, political, economic, psychological condition of the people in the whole world. You can't hear me? How come? Can you hear me, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So Babita is telling she can't hear. I don't know. You have some
Yes,
technical
sir.
problem in your instrument device. Please check it. Others are able to hear it, and I am speaking so loudly. Okay. Thank you. Uh, so, if you analyze the entire background of modern age, you find there is a sense of disillusionment which was prevailing all through the world, all across the world. Not a single country was, an exception to it. There was a sense of disappointment, there was a sense of devastation, there was a sense of disillusionment, there was a sense of pessimism and cynicism. And it happened so much so that people started searching for their identity. They were not able to locate who they are, what is their future, how are they going to be established in society, how do they build up their career, what should they study, and why should they study, where should they study. There is no job, there is no employment. The two world wars had devastated, shattered the socio-cultural life of the people in the modern age. And the traditional belief had collapsed. There was also scientific development. There was philosophical development. Scientists like Charles Darwin, philosophers like Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, these people they were having great influence on human psyche. So this is how you find a modern poetry was written under such type of condition. You must know what is the socio-political condition, the socio-cultural condition of the modern poetry when modern poetry was written. You know the great modern poets are T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, W.H. Auden, W.B. Yeats, Philip Larkin, Dylan Thomas, you know, Sylvia Plath, Wilfred Sassoon, Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, and all these people, they are the great poets. So now let's see what are the characteristic features of modern poetry. Modern poetry believed in the break from the tradition. They rejected the established norms of writing poetry. What are the established norms? There should be a rhyme scheme, there should be meter, there should be rhythm, there should be some subject matter which is highly traditional, conventional, normative. But the modern poets believed in or began to write in free verse. T.S. Eliot is the pioneer of free verse. He said it is verse liber. Verse liber is free verse. Eliot said there should not be any rhyme scheme. If you are sticking to the rhyme scheme, you will lose the thematic aspect. The theme will lose its importance. If you want to give priority to the theme, it has to be written in free verse. So, they introduced free verse in poetry. This is very important. Modern poetry is written in free verse. What do you mean by free verse? Free verse is the verse where there is no rhyme scheme. Say, for example, I am quoting a line from, two lines from Pope's poetry, Alexander Pope's poetry. Presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. Last word is scan in first line, the last word in second line is man. So scan and man, they are rhyming with each other. But here, in modern poetry, there is no rhyme scheme. And they don't believe in rhyme schemes. Okay. So this is how you find a free verse was a major technique that was adopted by the modern poets. They never put any emphasis on rhyme scheme. Rather, they avoided rhyme scheme and began to write in free verse. And that free verse was focusing on what type of topic, what type of theme. They focused on realism. They were very much into realism. They are more attached to realism, reason, intellect than to imagination, emotion. So the modern poets were very much realistic in their approach. They began to focus on the realistic problems of the people that they are facing in the society, especially soon after the completion of two world wars. So there was a break from tradition. There was a very remarkable break, noticeable break from the traditional approach to poetry. They introduced free verse in poetry. and they focused on the disjointed condition of modern life, how modern life is distracted, how modern life is disturbed, distracted, disjointed, you know, disenchanted. Those things are highlighted in modern poetry. And the bright example is the Wasteland of Shakespeare, is the Wasteland of T.S. Eliot. I'm sorry. The Wasteland of T.S. Eliot is the glaring example of disjointed modern life. They also focused on myths and allusions. The modern poets focused on myths, allusions, and they took their imagery from urban life, especially industrial township. They took their imagery from city life, from crowded metropolis, from industrial establishments. They also made use of symbolism and imagism. Imagist poet was Ezra Pound. He was the pioneer of imagism, and they made experimentation in language also. They introduced stream of consciousness in modern poetry, and they concentrated on their imagery. Their speech was colloquial, and they made use of unconventional syntax. What is syntax? Arrangement of words in a sentence is called syntax. So their syntax, or the syntax used by the modern poets, was unconventional. Then they also made use of irony, satire, ambiguity, allegory, alliteration. They never wanted to give any moral message directly. They avoided to give moral message directly. It is up to the readers to draw inference about the message, but they are not interested to give the moral message. They also made an attempt through their poetry to search for meaning in the midst of chaos. As I told you, they were looking for their identity. They feel that they have lost their identity. And against the backdrop of loss of identity, they began to look for their own identity. They never knew where they have lost their identity. The major themes that we notice in the modern poetry is disillusionment after war, loss of faith, moral uncertainty, decadent civilization, decadent culture. They also look for spiritual regeneration, spiritual renewal. They try to explore the subconscious level of human beings. In the writings of Freud, you find. Then they describe the urban influence, the urban experience. Nature is described as fragmented. Nature is never romanticized as it used to be done by the romantic poets. So the treatment of nature by the modern poets is different. Nature is fragmented as far as modern poets are concerned, because they know that after the two world wars, devastating, chaotic two world wars, nature has become totally fragmented. Nature has lost its essence, lost its charm, lost its appeal, lost its beauty. So the beauty of nature as presented by the romantic poets was not presented by the modern poets. And as I told you, the major poets of the modern age are T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, Philip Larkin, Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon, Wallace Stevens, Mariana Moore, E. E. Cummings, etc. So Eliot, T.S. Eliot, is a very renowned poet, a legendary poet of the modern age, who is famous for his poem The Westland. The Westland was written after the completion of First World War. First World War was completed in 1918 and Westland was written in 1922. So he adopted a kind of mythical method, a method of myth to impose order on chaos, to remove chaos and impose order. W.B. Yeats focused on the description of cyclical history and mysticism to deal with the modern crisis. And Ezra Pound promoted the attitude of reshaping the poetic diction, the poetic form. So now we'll take up the Westland of T.S. Eliot. The Westland, as you know, as I told you, was written in 1922. First World War came to an end in 1918. There was a great sense of disillusionment, despair, desperation, devastation, despondency among the people. Economy was totally shattered. Socio-cultural political life was devastated. As a result, T.S. Eliot considered the land where people are living as a wasteland. He said, this is a dead land, this is a cactus land, and there are heaps of broken images. Obviously, he made a reference to the devastations of the war to describe the land as a wasteland. It is a modern poem. The Wasteland is a modern poem that deals with the post-First World War condition. The post-war condition in the world, prevalent in the world. There is spiritual decay, there is moral dilemma, there is cultural fragmentation, and there is disillusionment. So for everything, they were, writing the poetry. So that was the kind of condition which was prevailing in the post-war scenario. When the war has brought about a trail of devastation, a trail of turmoil, a trail of turbulence, chaos, confusion, moral decay, cultural fragmentation, all these things were depicted in the Wasteland. The Wasteland is divided into 5 sections, remember. The Wasteland is a long poem which is written into 5 sections, or divided into 5 sections. The first section is known as the burial of the dead. The second section is known as a game of chess. Third section is known as the fire sermon. Fourth section is known as death by water. And fifth section is known as what the thunder said. So if you make a very intensive study of the entire poem, you find how T.S. Eliot has been critical about the socio-cultural condition prevalent in England. And do you know, the poem opens with the first stanza. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring the dull roots with spring rain. Now the question arises, why April is considered as the cruelest month? You should know that April is the spring season, or month of April brings spring season in European countries, especially in England. Rather, April is cruel in India. But the poet has written April is the cruelest month because he wanted to tell that the king who is ruling over England is referring to a myth of Fisher King. That Fisher King is an important person. He has no productive capacity. So he says, when our king is important, how do we enjoy the charm of April or spring season? So April or the spring season also appears cruel to us because our king is important. Our king cannot produce children. He has lost his productive capacity. And we have lost all hopes. All our hopes and aspirations have been dashed away. And moreover, the war has shattered everything. So we are in a state of despair, desperation, despondency, disappointment, disillusionment. And these lines brings out a contrast of the renewal of spring season with the spiritual barrenness of modern life. He says that people have become spiritually barren. I would refer you to Friedrich Nietzsche, whose legendary book is Thus Spoke Zarathustra. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche has said that God is dead. He has said three things. First, he said God is dead. Second, he said that man must try to be Übermensch, Superman. Übermensch means Superman. Man should make efforts, forget about God, and try to explore his potential in order to become an Übermensch. Then he said, you should have will to power. Man should have will to power. This is how Nietzsche has talked about the predicament of the modern man in his legendary book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Through the character of the Zarathustra, Nietzsche himself is telling three things. God is dead, try to be Übermensch, and have the will to power. Cherish the will to power. Similarly here, you find certain, conditions which are depicted here in the Westland, where you find in the section Burial of the Dead, the poet is trying to bring out a comparison and contrast between the renewal spirit of the spring season with the spiritual barrenness prevalent in modern life. And he also introduces or discusses a few fragmented voices. A European woman is recalling her childhood memories. The name of the woman is Mary. There is Madame Sosostri, who is making prediction of the doom. Madame Sosostri is a tarot card reader, and she is taking out the card and making prediction of the doom of the human civilization. Then there is a crowd in London which is moving. Amid the jostling crowd, the industrial workers are going to join their industrial establishments, and on the river bridge, on the Thames river bridge, there is a big crowd. So the main theme that is depicted here in the burial of the dead is what? The main theme is how people are leading a very chaotic life, and how the humanity is living, or human beings are living in a spiritual wasteland which is disconnected from nature, disconnected from humanism, disconnected from tradition, disconnected from convention, disconnected from religion. So here you find the burial of the dead talks about the dryness, the wasteland, the dryness of the wasteland, the sterility of the wasteland, and how human beings are behaving like mad people, and they don't have any, future, bright future. So spiritual desolation has occurred. Spiritual alienation has occurred in modern life, and modern life is disjointed. Modern life is totally fragmented. It is totally formless. Then comes the game of chess. In the game of chess, it depicts two contrasting scenes of human relationship. How human relationship is passing through two contrasting scenes. One is an opulent room, well decorated room, where a woman behaves in a neurotic manner and she speaks in a fragmented voice. A woman behaves in a neurotic manner. She speaks, chatters, and jabbers something meaningless things, and there you find she is speaking in fragmented sentences, and there you find there is a symbol of alienation in higher society. She belongs to the higher echelon of the society, but she doesn't have peace in her life. She is perhaps neglected by her husband and her family. Then comes, there is a conversation in a pub among the working class women, and they have been talking about the failure of a woman in her marriage. The woman is Lil. The woman Lil, how she has not become successful in her marriage, and how her marriage has proved to be devastating. So this kind of discussion, opulently decorated room, a sophisticated woman living there, but she is talking in a very fragmented voice. She is not happy. She doesn't seem to be happy. And in the second case, there is a pub and there is a conversation going on between the working class women, and they have been talking about another woman's failure in marriage. These scenes, they highlight emptiness, they highlight darkness, they highlight meaninglessness and breakdown of communication in modern society. There is no love, there is only, opportunism. How people are opportunistic. People don't believe in the higher human values like love, camaraderie, bonhomie, goodwill, cooperation, collaboration, compassion, sympathy, devotion, dedication, tolerance, solidarity, sacrifice. All those things have been thrown to the winds, and people have become selfish, opportunistic. This is what is highlighted here in the section A Game of Chess. Next comes the fire sermon. In the fire sermon, T.S. Eliot introduces a wonderful character, a brilliant character. You can compare this character with another character, very legendary character in our own Mahabharata. In our Indian epic, the Mahabharata, you must have heard of a character called Sanjay. Sanjay was narrating all the details of the Mahabharata Kurukshetra war to blind Dhritarashtra, the blind king Dhritarashtra. So here the narrator is Tiresias. His name is Tiresias, and he is narrating. He is also blind. He is a hermaphrodite. He is neither a male nor a female. He is a hermaphrodite. He is neither a male nor a female. So he is making his observations, expressing his observations, how there is sordidness in the modern world and how the river water of river Thames, the water of river Thames has been polluted. Tiresias finds that there is a mechanical relationship. There is no love. There is no compassion among the people in the family. They are highly opportunistic, and he also makes a reference to an encounter between a typist and a clerk who used to have sexual relationship. They used to have sex, but in a mechanical manner, as if sex is the part of the routine. They go for sex, finish up, there is no love, there is no embrace, there is no hug, there is no sweet conversation, there is no, pampering, nothing. So sex has been also reduced to a mechanical exercise, a routine exercise between a typist and a clerk. That is what is pointed out by Tiresias in the section, the fire sermon. This section is interwoven with references to Buddha's fire sermon. Lord Buddha, Gautam Buddha, used to give fire sermons. And Saint Augustine, another philosopher also, he talks about fire sermons, who comes out with the suggestion of spiritual purification. Buddha also talks about spiritual purification. The end of your desire brings an end to your sorrow. The end of your desire brings an end to your sorrow. This is what Buddha had said. Saint Augustine had also talked about the spiritual purification, spiritual cleansing, spiritual regeneration, spiritual renewal, spiritual purgation. Now, there is the theme of lust, L-U-S-T, lust, sensuality are being focused, and there is no love, which leads to moral and spiritual emptiness. So a society without love, based on only sex, immorality, sensuality, leads to moral crisis, spiritual emptiness. Then comes the fourth section, which is a wonderful, small section, which is known as death by water. It's a very small section. The Phoenician sailor, whose name is Phlebas, he gets drowned. And this drowning of the Phoenician sailor symbolizes the cycle of life, death, and decay. What is the cycle of life? Birth, growth, death, and decay. Birth, growth, death, and decay. So when the Phoenician sailor gets drowned in the sea, is a very good sailor, but it so happened he met with an accident and he died in the sea by drowning. So this is being referred to as the cycle of life. So the Phoenician sailor symbolizes the cycle of life, and this incident also serves as a warning for inevitable mortality and the futility of material pursuits. The Phoenician sailor never knew he is going to die so soon. While starting his sail in the sea, did the Phoenician sailor Phlebas know that he is going to die? No, certainly not. He was going to set his sail and reach the destination. Hardly did he know that he is going to be the person who will die, and that day is going to be his last day. He has never dreamt of it. So this speaks about the futility of human life, the mortality of human life, uncertainty of human life, and inevitability of death. Death is inevitable. If death is inevitable, human beings should not be so arrogant, so egoistic, so proud. That is what Eliot has indirectly tried to express. Human beings in this world should never be egoistic, arrogant, or proud of their material possessions. Rather, they should develop spiritual awareness among themselves and believe that life is futile, life is mortal, life is meaningless, life is short, life is transitory. So if life is transitory, what is the use of showing so much of pride? Then comes the last section, which is known as what the thunder said. In this connection, in the last line of this section, you will be surprised to know there are quotations which are taken from our Indian Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Have you heard of it? I am asking you, have you heard of these lines? Anyone? Any volunteer?
No, sir.
No, I'll tell you. Lastly, Eliot had said, Datta Dayadvam Damyata Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Look, T.S. Eliot was born in America, settled in London, became a renowned English poet, but he could read Indian Upanishad, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. We have 108 Upanishads. Out of 108, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is very important. And these lines occur in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Datta Dayadvam Damyata. Datta means give. Dayadvam means show compassion, show sympathy. And Damyata means control. Control what? Control your evil desire. Control your passion. Control your ego. Control your arrogance. Try to be a human being, a good human being. So here, in this section, what the thunder said, there are apocalyptic images of drought, desolation, and collapse of cities. You know what is apocalyptic image? Means actually it has not happened, but you feel as if it is going to happen. You have a kind of, premonition, forewarning. You get early warning that this is going to happen. So the imagery, apocalyptic imagery of drought, collapse of cities, devastation of cities, destruction of cities, ruin of cities, desolation, isolation, separation, estrangement, alienation are depicted. Then there is a passion for exploring the Holy Grail. The quest for Holy Grail is an imagery which suggests never mind, never get disappointed. There is still hope and there may be spiritual recreation. Spiritualism may be recreated among the people. People may become spiritual. I must tell you, the Westland starts with pessimism but ends with optimism. Initially, Eliot has portrayed this land as a wasteland, but lastly he has said there is still scope. If you reform yourself, you can get spirituality. You can get a good society. You can get a good human life. You can have camaraderie, brotherhood, bonhomie, goodwill, and harmony. So there, he said, there is thunder, no doubt. Dark cloud is there. And let us search for the Holy Grail. Holy Grail is the blood of Christ kept in a small vessel and that vessel is worshipped by the Christians. So when they are looking for the Holy Grail, it means they are attempting to bring about spiritual regeneration, spiritual renewal. And then in this section, what the thunder said, the voice of the thunder is audible. And thunder says, Datta Dayadam Dhammata. Thunder says, oh human beings, don't worry, relax. Try to inculcate these qualities. Try to imbibe these qualities. You will be ideal human beings. What qualities? The quality of giving. There is more joy in giving than in taking. There is more pleasure in sacrifice than in opportunism. So he says, give, offer generously, offer magnanimously, sympathize, show sympathy, show kindness, show mercy, show compassion. Then control. You can only offer, you can only sympathize only when you give up your evil desires. You control your evil desires. Desires like selfishness, arrogance, ego, pride, opportunism, self centeredness, all these things you have to give up so that you can have a wonderful society and there will be Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. There will be peace, harmony, solidarity everywhere. So the poem ends with a hope, optimism for renewal, regeneration. Although it appears uncertain, still it depends on you. So, first of all, the poem talks about the wasteland, spiritual desolation, fragmentation of culture, meaninglessness of life. Then there is cycle of death and birth, which is a universal pattern, and finally the search for renewal. So this is what is your wasteland, and this is how you can study wasteland. Ki wasteland starts with pessimism but ends with optimism. Next we will switch over to W.B. Yeats. W.B. Yeats was equally a very renowned poet. He was as popular as Eliot was. Maybe he has not ascended to the popularity position of Eliot, but his approach to poetry is different. W.B. Yeats is called one of the last romantics of English literature because he also put emphasis on imagination, emotion, nature, color, splendor, glamour, beauty, art, Greek art, architecture, sculpture, etc. He was born in 1865 and died in 1939. He stands as one of the greatest modern poets in English literature. Uh, Here you find he carried out a kind of tradition which encompassed a blending between the romantic tradition and the modernist tradition. He was a kind of bridge, a kind of rapport, a kind of conduit, a kind of connection between the romantic tradition started by William Wordsworth and the modern tradition started by Eliot, T.S. Eliot. He combined Celtic myth In his poetry, you come across Celtic myths, Irish nationalism, symbolism, mysticism, and modernist technique. For our convenience, for your convenience, I may divide the career of W.B. Yeats, the poetic career of W.B. Yeats, into three phases. You may study him as the early Romantic and Celtic twilight phase, and secondly, the middle nationalist phase, and the third phase is the late modernist phase. In the early Romantic phase, you find there is depiction of myth, folklore, the influence of pre-Raphaelites on his poetry, and in the middle phase you come across the depiction of patriotism, nationalism, Irish nationalism, and political movements. And the third phase, or the last phase, is the modernist phase, where you find the symbolism, the philosophical tradition, and the poetry based on reflection, dream. Yeats was obviously influenced by romantic poets like Shelley and Keats. W.B. Yeats was greatly influenced by the romantic poets like Shelley and Keats and the pre-Raphaelites as well. He studied Irish folklore, myth, mysticism a great deal. His poems appear dreamlike, musical, symbolic, and they often celebrate Ireland as an ideal place of living, as an ideal country. In his poem The Lake Isle of Innisfree, Yeats is found to be yearning for peace and harmony in nature. In the poem The Stolen Child, the poet Yeats develops escapist tendency and carries out the mystical vision of fairyland. He talks about a fairyland, an imaginary land. So his style is very ornate style. Diction is very ornamental, lyrical. He makes use of romantic imagery. And he also champions the cause of Irish literary revival. He was greatly influenced by his beloved Modgan. He was deeply in love with Modgan, but Modgan ditched him. Modgan did not marry him. Modgan married another person called MacBride. And his poems talk about national identity of Ireland. He is an Irish born. He belongs to Ireland, not England. So he always talks about Ireland. National identity, heroism and struggle. And in the latest phase, he talks about his concerns with time, change, mortality, history, human tendency, and brings about the symbolism also, symbolism like gyre, etc. So his poems appear to be ironic, meditative, and philosophical. There is apocalyptic vision in the poem like Second Coming. In a poem like Selling to Byzantium, he has talked about art vis-a-vis life, immortality vis-a-vis mortality. And in poems like Among School Children, he makes a fusion of art life, aging, death, etc. So you may find W.B. Yeats as a great poet, and let us read his Easter poem of W.B. Yeats. Easter 1916. Easter 1916 is written after the Easter Rising in Dublin. Dublin happens to be the capital of Ireland. So there was a rising, there was a revolution or agitation. There was an armed rebellion against the British rule. England was ruling over Ireland in those times in 1916. And the time was Easter, a Christian festival. So during the Easter or on the Easter day, there was an armed rebellion against the British rule. Many leaders were executed. Yeats was very unhappy. At the same time, he commended, praised, admired, adored their sacrifice and called them martyrs. Yeats recalls his meeting with the revolutionaries in ordinary setting before the uprising. Then after the uprising of Easter 1916, their lives were transformed into immortal symbols, all changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. So, Yeats cannot simply digest how these people have lost their lives for the sake of their country. What a great sacrifice these people have made. Why have they made this sacrifice? Because they are patriotic, they are nationalistic, they have given priority to their motherland, and they have never cared for their lives. They have laid down their lives, they have become martyrs. And he talked about certain key figures who have lost their lives, like Patrick Pearse, a poet and a leader, John McBride, the husband of Mudgun, Constant Markievicz, a political activist, Thomas MacDonagh, a poet. They have died. See, here in this poem, Easter 1916, you come across a kind of transformation. What kind of transformation is that? The ordinary people become eternal symbols through their sacrifice. It is not a mean sacrifice. It is something, a very great sacrifice, which they did for their own country. Then it also talks about death and immortality. How their death has bestowed upon them immortality. Those who die for their countries, we call them वीर गति प्राप्त हुआ, शहीद हो गया. He has become a martyr. He has become immortal. His material body has gone away, but his soul remains, and he remains in the minds of the people, memory of the people, as a great man. Mahatma Gandhi has been dead since October 30, 1948, 30th of October. But today we remember Mahatma Gandhi because of his outstanding contributions as father of the nation to Indian independence. So that is how, through their deaths, Yeats describes, through their deaths, these characters like Patrick Pearse, McBride, they have become immortal. Now, as a poet, he makes use of symbolism. There is a terrible beauty. He talks about a terrible beauty. Terrible beauty, this symbolism definitely talks about a paradox, capturing both admiration and horror at the rising. When Easter armed rebellion took place, yet says a terrible beauty is born. Means the unity of the people has been created and they have displayed their unity before the government of England. This is what people of Ireland can do. They are no longer interested to be subservient to you. You cannot dominate over them. You cannot rule over them. They would like to have their own independence. They would like to rule their own country, Ireland. So there is tension in this poem. There is also a kind of refrain when Yeats says, all changed, changed utterly. A national myth is born. The individuals who are hitherto appearing to be selfish, now they have become national heroes. How do they become national heroes? Because they have sacrificed their lives for the freedom of their own country. And their own country is very much grateful to such type of people. His careful balance of emotion and reflection shows Yeats as a poet historian turning political events into enduring literature. So, Yeats was definitely a great poet, and his Easter 1916 has revealed how he has made poetry carry the significance of nationalism, significance of patriotism, significance of personal sacrifice. Now we'll take up another poet, Philip Larkin. Philip Larkin is equally the second generation of poets. Philip Larkin, Dylan Thomas, Sylvia Plath, they belong to the second generation of modern poetry. And he was considered as the most important voice of post-war English poetry. Philip Larkin is considered to be the most important voice in post-war modern poetry. He is known for his plain style, simple language, lucidity of expression, skepticism, and remarkable honesty. These are the characteristic features of his poetry. Philip Larkin was associated with the movement along with people like Donald Davy, Kingsley Amish, Tom Gunn. They opposed the modernist complexity of Eliot and Pound. They wanted clarity, realism, and a return to the traditional forms. Look, I told you how these people they belong to second generation of poetry. And the first generation was dominated by the T.S. Eliot, W.B. Yeats, W.H. Auden, Ezra Pound, etc. And there is an allegation of certain readers, Eliot and Pound, they were making their poetry very complex. It is unintelligible, very hard to read and understand. So, Philip Larkin supported the movement against complexity of modern poetry, and he opposed the complexity of Eliot and Pound and pleaded in favor of simplicity of language. He wanted there should be clarity, there should be transparency, there should be realism in poetry, and they should return to, or modern poetry should return to, the traditional forms. If you make an objective, impartial, dispassionate analysis of Larkin's poetry, you will be struck with awe and wonder to find how his poetry also deals with. He may be opposed to Eliot and Pound. His poetry also deals with the post-war disillusionment, the post-war chaos, post-war turmoil, post-war confusion, post-war turbulence, post-war disappointment, post-war devastation in his poetry. And he also deals with the worries and anxieties of middle class life, middle class people living in the society. He also focuses on the inevitability of death. Death is inevitable. Life has a limited span. Life ranges from birth to death, and the cycle of life comprises birth, growth, death, and decay, degeneration. So he focuses on aging, passage of time. So he says time is very important, and time makes everything possible. As time moves on, we begin to age. A child is born, he has his childhood, goes into the stage of adolescence, becomes an adult, then becomes a mature man, then he becomes old, then becomes pretty old, which is described as Shakespeare as second childhood, then he dies or passes away. So this is the charm of life, this is the meaning of life. So life is transient, life is transitory, life is evanescent, life is futile as well. Life is subject to death, decay, and degeneration. For a human being, what survives is his contribution to the society, is his work in the society, his performance in the society. In whatever profession he might be, he should try to prove his mettle, to show his mettle, how useful he is to the society. Otherwise, people will forget him within no time. So many people are dying. How many people are remembered? Very few people are remembered. Who are remembered? Those people who have made some significant contribution to the society. Those who have made significant contribution, those people are only remembered, not all. So, Philip Larkin, in his poetry, deals with the passage of time and the significance of mortality. He tries to make people conscious that, oh, human beings, oh, my dear friends, never feel that you are immortal. Remember, Adam and Eve, they have eaten the fruit of the forbidden tree and made the human race mortal, subject to death, decay, and degeneration. So you never feel you are going to remain forever. You are going to live forever. No, no, my dear. Your life is too short, too brittle. So within that short period, try to prove your essence. You try to show your talent, try to prove that being born as human being, I have made this contribution to society so that you can die peacefully. You can die with satisfaction. You look how I have made my life very, very useful. How I have made substantial contribution to the upliftment of my society. How I have contributed in the field of science. How I have contributed in the field of philosophy, psychology, mathematics, literature, art, architecture, sculpture, social service, medical science, and what not. Information technology, engineering technology, and what not. So that would give you immense satisfaction. You will die with satisfaction. I have done something for the society. So he focuses on ordinary life. He focuses on common experience like train journey, wedding function, condition in the library, passage of time, importance of death. He also deals with love, sex, and disappointment. प्यार, धोखा और separation. Relationship in his poetry is very much tinged with failure. Most of the love relationship, amorous relationship, ends in failure in his poetry. And he uses irony to describe the failure in love. So he uses irony in his poetry. His poetry also highlights the sense of isolation, sense of alienation, sense of estrangement in life. He had developed a kind of cynical outlook towards religion. He developed cynicism towards religion and society. He had a kind of skeptical outlook, cynical outlook towards society, towards the future of the society. And he reveals his nostalgia, his nostalgic attitude towards the lost values. He feels that the past was unique, past was enjoyable, past was really meaningful, and now the decadence has set in. He starts focusing on decadence, how society is decaying. Moral values have become decadent. There is moral dilemma. There is moral crisis. People are not adopting the ethical attitude. So, he used to focus on moral dilemma and start praising the wonderful atmosphere laid out in the past. The values of the past are no longer found nowadays. Nowadays, people are opportunistic, self centered, selfish, and they care more for the end than for the means. There are two things: one is the means, the other is the end. So, a good man is he who always, makes a choice to adopt the good means, to adopt the moral means, ethical means, in order to reach the end. But there are certain people who used to focus on the end only. They feel that whatever may be the means, we must reach the end without any problem. Such type of people are also there. So he talks about the means and end. He uses very plain diction. He doesn't make his language very complex, very complicated. very sonorous, very high flown. His expression is very lucid, and he writes his poetry in a conversational tone that is very important. Philip Larkin writes his poems in a very conversational tone and uses colloquial language. He prefers a regular rhyme and meter, the traditional stanzaic pattern. He may have dealt with modern subject matter, but he trickles back or he goes back to the traditional meter, traditional rhythm. Subject matter is modern, but style is traditional. He uses irony, understatement, allegory, and then he talks about the changes, how the changes occur in different seasons, like the changes that time brings. He makes always reference to the passing time. So this is how you know Philip Larkin emerges as a great modern poet of the second generation. He is also known for his emotional honesty, his clarity, his transparency. He is called as a record keeper of post-war British life. He embodies a stoic realism. He is very critical of the complexity of Eliot and Ezra Pound. He doesn't like the complex and the difficult language, difficult images used by Eliot and Ezra Pound. He wants to be very simple, very lucid, very colloquial, very conversational with his readers. Let's take up our next poet, Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas belongs to the same second generation of modern poets. He's a distinctive poet of the 20th century. He's known for his musical language. His language is very musical. There is melody in his language. He uses rich imagery and he had passionate engagement with life and death. Very rich imagery he uses in his poetry, and he has a kind of passionate engagement with life and death. In the modern age, you find all the poets are very much preoccupied with death. They know that death is inevitable, and they always treat life, or read life, or study life, or observe life vis-a-vis death, vis-a-vis passage of time. How time passes, man ages, and finally he dies. There is no escape from death. This is known to the modern poets. He is a very renowned poet, much talked about popular poet of the modern age. He blends romantic intensity with modernist experimentation. Romantic intensity, he had romantic intensity as well. He loved imagination, he loved emotion, he loved nature, he loved flora and fauna, he loved the fountains and mountains, he loved the river and rivulets, you know, he loved the animals, music, the chirping of the birds, and he has a deeply personal sense of myth. He had a deeply personal sense of myth as well as a vision. Dylan Thomas was obsessed with the sound of words. Whatever poetry he writes, he always makes sure that his language appears to be musical. His language makes some melody or creates some melody, is not dry, dull, drab, prosaic, uninteresting. His verse is often compared to music with a rhythmic flow, internal rhyme, alliteration, assonance. Most of the critics they used to compare his verse, compare his poetry with what? With the flow of music, lilting, canorous, melodious, sweet, soothing flow of music. And the flow also becomes rhythmic with internal rhymes, alliteration, and assonance. There is use of imagery in his poems. They are dense with visual imagery, tactile imagery, either visual or tactile. They are drawn from nature. Either his imagery is drawn from nature or from his childhood or from sexuality or from death. So, from various areas, he tries to draw his images. And the areas are childhood, sexuality, death, nature. Landscapes are produced, sea, river, seasons, beautiful picturesque scenery. They are presented in his poetry in order to show the life's cyclical nature. Dylan Thomas wants to show to his readers how life moves in a cycle. It moves in a cycle, in a circle. That's why he focuses on the scenic and picturesque beauty, the river, the fountain, the spring, the stream, the flora, the fauna, the landscape, and all those things. His poems are often difficult. Some critics used to say his poems appear to be difficult due to his compressed syntax and surreal metaphors. He uses a bit compressed syntax and surreal metaphors. What is complex syntax? Syntax is arrangement of words in a sentence. So he uses such type of words in such a complicated manner that it becomes difficult for the ordinary reader to understand. But it is just the different in case of Philip Larkin, which you have studied right now. The syntax of Philip Larkin is very simple, soothing, and intelligible, understandable, colloquial, lucid. But Dylan Thomas syntax is bit complicated. And the metaphors are surreal. What is surreal? Which belongs to the world of imagination. What that is not real is surreal. Critics compare his work to the works of metaphysical poets like John Donne, George Herbert, Richard Crasso, Henry Vaughan, etc. because the images are so complex, the syntax is so complex that sometimes the readers fail to understand, and the critics compare his syntax or his language or his image pattern to the images used by the metaphysical poets. As far as his poetry is concerned, we come across his emphasis on certain particular themes. What are the popular themes of his poetry? He deals with life, the movement of life, the beginning of life, the movement of life, and the end of life. He deals with birth, death. He also deals with immortality. Most of his poems deal with the mortality, yet they affirm the vitality of life. Life may be mortal, life may be short lived, life may be very brief, but still life is vital, life is relevant, life is meaningful. And how is it made meaningful? It is made meaningful by the people themselves. It depends on the people how to make their life meaningful. They can make their life meaningful through their own action, through their own performance. Because he says, death shall have no dominion. If you want to live life in king size, with good performance, with ethics, morality, spiritualism, your life will be meaningful. People will remember you and you will be immortal. There is no doubt about it. So that is what he says. Life is made meaningful by your action. Life is not futile. Life is not meaningless. Yes, life is short. Life is transitory. Life is evanescent. But still then, life can be made meaningful if you desire to make it so. Then he deals with childhood, he deals with innocence. He also focuses on nature as his theme in most of his poems. Nature is a major theme. The pulsating joy of nature, the melody of nature, the richness of nature stirs his heart. And he also describes, like romantic poets, how nature is connected with human civilization, with human life, and human beings can make their life meaningful by coming in contact with nature. Dylan Thomas also reveals mysticism and religious overtones in his poetry. He is not an orthodox, but still then he believes in biblical cadence and the mythic pattern. He believes in religion. He believes in mystical undertones. However, in the entire poetic firmament of Dylan Thomas, we notice that his poetry carries verbal melody and imagery. He commands deep emotional power, and he has the unique ability to turn private vision into universal expression. At certain point of time, he is criticized for his complexity of syntax, but still then the fact remains that he is a legendary poet. He is a great poet. There is no doubt about it. we'll switch over to our next poet and the last poet perhaps, Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath, you know, is a very significant voice in the armament of modern poetry. So, she was considered to be a very renowned poet of the mid 20th century poetry. She belongs to a different category altogether. She belongs to the confessional school of poetry or confessional school of poets. The poets who make confessions about their own views, about their own life, about their own character, about their own conduct, about their own schooling, about their own relations, etc. So Sylvia Plath stands as one of the most significant voices of mid 20th century, the second generation of poets, and she belongs to the confessional school of poets. The other poets who belong to this confessional school are Robert Lowell, Annie Sexton. So Sylvia Plath, Robert Lowell, Annie Sexton are the confessional poets. Her poetry marks the psychological intensity. In the poetry of Sylvia Plath, we come across the psychological intensity, the emotional candor or emotional frankness, and the technical precision. Remember these three important characteristics of Sylvia Plath's poetry. First is psychological intensity. Second is raw emotional candor. Candor means openness, raw emotional candor, and technical precision. So, psychological intensity, emotional candor, and technical precision. These are the three characteristics of our poetry. She writes her poetry out of deep personal experience. I have told you she is a confessional poet. And the job of a confessional poet is to write subjective poetry. The other day I talked to you about subjective poetry and objective poetry. What is subjective poetry? Subjective poetry is that poetry which centers around the emotion, the idea, the thought, the feeling, the predilection, the choices, the preferences of the poet himself, not for others. He writes poetry by drawing his own feelings. He doesn't bother about the rest of the world. But the poets who write objective poetry, they used to write on certain universal themes. The themes which apply to them as well as to the rest of the world. The people other than himself should be in a position to understand and appreciate what he is writing. He can't confine himself to his own ideas, own emotions, own passions, own thoughts, own feelings, own choices, own predilections, own likes, own dislikes. Because you are a poet, you are a public figure, you have to take note of the feelings of others. But here we find Sylvia Plath doesn't care for others. She writes from her own personal experience. Maybe her experience is identical with the experience of others. Maybe her ideas are identical with the ideas of others. That may be sheer coincidence. But it may happen, may not happen. You are not sure. She talks about her troubled marriage. She was married to another poet, Ted Hughes. Sylvia Plath had married to another English poet named Ted Hughes, but their marriage did not succeed. She had some troubles with her marriage. So she talks about her troubled marriage. She talks about her own depression. After her marriage became unsuccessful, she turned into depression. As a result, in a state of depression, she felt isolated, alienated, estranged, separated from the society, from her family, from her husband, from her children, from her friend circle, from everybody. And virtually, she became a loner. Like her compatriots. Sylvia Plath made an attempt to transport her private pain into universal art. Whatever pain, whatever anguish, whatever torture, whatever torment she had faced, she wanted to universalize it. She wanted to portray in her poetry in such a manner so that others read it and appreciate it, visualize it, experience it, empathize it. So she wanted to transmit and transport her private pain into universal art. Her work is distinct, separate, different from the imagistic sharpness and mythic undertones. It is distinct, very distinct, for its imagistic sharpness. The images are very sharp, and the myths are having different undertones, various undertones, variegated undertones, divergent undertones. When we make an objective analysis of Sylvia Plath's poetry, or the poems, we find death is a major theme in her poetry. Death, damnation, degeneration. It is a recurring theme in her poems. This is treated as a release, a transformation, a liberation, a regeneration, a rebirth. Sylvia Plath believes that death brings about liberation. Death brings an end to your pain, to your anguish, to your cares, to your anxieties, to your trials, to your tribulations, to your fret, to your favor, to your agonies, to your torture, to your torment, you know, to your purgatorial suffering. Everything come to an end after death. So death is viewed by Sylvia Plath as a platform for liberation. Liberation from what? From the mundane pain and anguish. In a poem, there is a character called Lady Lazarus. She dramatizes the repeated symbolic deaths and resurrections. And death is a source of resurrection, recreation, rebirth, regeneration. Sylvia Plath is very much aware of the patriarchal hegemony. She knows pretty well that in the present day society, it is dominated by the male members. Patriarchy continues, and the females or the women have no distinct role in society. They remain subjugated, they remain suppressed, they remain as second grade citizens. They are not given any importance in the family, in the society. Patriarchal hegemony continues, and she wanted to question the female identity in a patriarchal society. She wanted to outline the position of a woman in a male dominated society. What kind of position is led by a woman? Is she free? Does she have an independent voice? Can she act with independence? Does she have her own choice? Is she respected by the family members? Does the family recognize her contribution? Do the children recognize her as a great source of, you know, inspiration, pillar of strength for their nourishment and all that? She had a few poems, poems like Daddy, poems like The Applicant talk about the roles played by the women, the insignificant role played by the women, and she makes use of anger against the male dominated society. She is a kind of crusader against patriarchy. She doesn't like patriarchy at all. She doesn't like the exploitation of women. She doesn't like the women should have no role in society. The women should be overshadowed by the patriarchy. In her poetry, nature is often portrayed in a distorted manner. And nature in her poetry reflects the inner turmoil. In a poem like Ariel, there is a horse ride, and the horse ride becomes a metaphor for creative release and self annihilation. So, Sylvia Plath is very critical of male hegemony, patriarchal hegemony, and she has always championed the cause of women. And she always wants that women should be liberated. She views death as a liberator, as a source of liberation, rebirth, regeneration. In many of her poems, Sylvia Plath is bound to make an attempt to bring about a balance between life and art. She is very conscious that art is immortal, life is mortal. Life is futile, life is short lived. But art is eternal, perennial, immortal, memorable, enduring, abiding, transcendental. The artist dies, but the art doesn't die. And it is through art the artist remains alive even after his death. Even after the death of the artist, the art he has created keeps him alive in the minds of the people, in the memory of the people. Her imagery that she makes use in her poetry appear to be very vivid. Sometimes her imagery is taken from the surreal world. She blends the domestic with the violent, but the imagery used to be very vivid. Sometimes from the real world, sometimes from the surreal world. She had a great emotional intensity. Sylvia Plath, in her poems, has expressed her great emotional intensity. Her poems are formally controlled. The rhythms are very sharp, and she is very careful in choosing the words. She doesn't make use of, you know, very controversial words, difficult words, sonorous words, high flown language. She is very much aware of the limitations of a poet because she knows that poetry is written for the readers. Of course, it is the duty of a poet to write because Shelley has said poets are the unacknowledged legislators of mankind. You may accept their poetry, may reject their poetry, may praise their poetry, may criticize their poetry. The job of a poet is to write because that is a kind of, you know, what? A kind of obsession, preoccupation with him. Unless he writes poetry, he can't heave a sigh of relief. So that is the case with the poets. So in that case, a poet doesn't bother whether you appreciate his poetry or criticize his poetry. So Sylvia Plath is very much aware of her responsibility, her social responsibility, and her responsibility as a poet. So she writes poetry in such a manner which becomes readable, intelligible, appreciable for the readers. She makes use of rhythm, carefully chooses the words. She makes use of irony and sometimes she uses a multi-layered persona. Irony, allegory, alliteration, all those things are also found. She is praised as a great poet of the mid 20th century. She is also known for transforming her private agony, her private despair into universal art. Everyone starts appreciating her poetry because if she describes her personal agony in a personal manner, nobody would like it. But she describes her personal agony, her personal despair, her private problems in such a manner so that it appears universal. As I told you, remember the definition of poetic diction by William Wordsworth, which was written in preface to lyrical ballads. What did Wordsworth say about poetic diction? A poet should choose incidents and situations from ordinary and common life and throw a color of imagination in such a manner so that ordinary things appear extraordinary and common things appear uncommon. Similar is the case with Sylvia Plath. So Sylvia Plath used to take up her personal agony. You know what is her personal agony? Her personal agony is that she had a very unsuccessful marriage. She had married to another eminent English poet named Ted Hughes, very popular poet, but they did not pull on well. Their marriage did not last long, so she had to go for separation, and she is disgusted with the institution of marriage, and she also develops a kind of disbelief, a kind of distrust towards the male folk, and there arose his disapproval of patriarchal hegemony, and she started questioning how well the women are treated in the male dominated society. She made it clear through her poetry that her private agony should get a universal color. So she wrote or presented or portrayed her private difficulties, her private disappointment in such a manner so that it appeared as if this disappointment, this agony, this anguish, this painful experience is not only particular to a particular woman, is not only applicable to a particular woman, it is applicable to the entire women generation, women race. So that was the art, that was the brilliance, that was the strategy that Sylvia Plath had adopted while delineating, while portraying her own bitter experience, her own painful experience with her husband and her unsuccessful marriage. She had proved her technical brilliance because she had a wonderful ability, a very commendable ability to blend myth with confession. She was a feminist, and most of her poems deal with feminism, the poor condition of women, how women are treated like doormats, how women are not respected in the society, how they do not get the similar kind of respect which is commanded by the male folk, their counterparts. Her work is mostly, if you look into the big chunk of her work, they appear to be, autobiographical. Most of her poetry is autobiographical, but her artistry or her artistic excellence lies in transforming her personal matter into symbolic poetry, universal matter. So, uh, she focuses on the themes of feminism, her personal life, the mental illness, depression, how depression brings about a different kind of feeling. She makes an attempt to integrate biographical elements, and she tries to contextualize them in her poetry. She is definitely known as a great poet as far as confessional poetry is concerned. As I told you, she is a confessional poet belonging to the tradition of Robert Lowell. She emphasizes on her personal life, but that personal life is portrayed as a universal agony. The agony faced in her personal life is projected as a universal agony by the alembic of her poetic talent, poetic genius. She prepares her poems through myths, archetypal dimensions, historical traditions. There is also scope to interpret the myth. She combines the technical precision with imagery and metaphor. She makes her poetry one of the most distinctive genres of English literature. And death and resurrection, death, liberation, recreation, regeneration, and resurrection are the major motifs in our poetry. In her poems, death is not only treated as a dominant motive, as a source of annihilation, it is also viewed as a transformative passage, a transformative tool, a transformative platform for which people should become conscious that life has no meaning. Life can be added with meaning through your own performance, through your own work, through your own efforts. So this becomes a transformative tool. She always makes her personal agony as a universal feature. And in her poems, she makes an attempt to explore the fragmented identity of the women, the discrimination of gender or gender discrimination found in contemporary society. In her poem Daddy, we find there is personal anger with historical imagery like Electra complex, Nazism. So she plans or she advises to create or to cause or to bring about a very fierce rebellion against patriarchal oppression. So whatever patriarchal oppression is there, a rebellion is necessary according to Sylvia Plath. She makes a reference to Nazism. She makes a reference to Electra complex. Do you know what is Electra complex? Does anybody know what is Electra complex?
Sir, it means,
Any volunteer?
yeah, this was a theory. It's a psychological complex, just opposite to the Oedipus complex, where it is
Very
said that
good.
a girl is, let's say, more inclined towards her father, and
Father.
she sees her mother as a competitor or something.
Very good. Very good. Niharika, do you know the myth, the exact myth behind it?
Yes, sir, I am not I'm not well versed with the names, but yes, I have read about it.
let
It
me
was
let me
about
tell
this.
you. Let me tell
Okay.
you. Let me refresh your memory. During the Trojan War, Agamemnon was the commander of the Greek army. Okay. The Trojan War was fought for, 10 years. So Agamemnon left his home for 10 years. His wife's name is Electra, and his son's name is Orestes. His daughter's name is, his wife's name is Clytemnestra. His daughter's name is Electra. Son's name is Orestes. So when Agamemnon left his home for 10 years, his wife Clytemnestra fell in love with a person called Aegisthus. And after Agamemnon returned, Aegisthus and Clytemnestra, both of them together, they killed, murdered Agamemnon. Electra could know about it. So Electra and Orestes, both brother and sister, they killed Clytemnestra as well as Aegisthus. So since then it is called Electra complex, means daughter's affection, daughter's inclination towards her father is known as Electra complex, and son's inclination towards mother is known as Oedipus complex. Okay, Niharika?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the myth. So this is how Sylvia Plath has been very important in the entire sphere or domain of middle English, middle part of modern English poetry. Sylvia Plath's poems also deal with awareness about her own self. She wanted to make people aware of their own limitations, and she also made use of some surreal images, myths and surreal images also she began to use. Her tone is very confessional, vulnerable. There is mythic reference, and you find she is definitely a very confessional poet. She doesn't mind to be called a confessional poet along with Robert Lowell. So this is how Sylvia Plath was very relevant to the modern age. Thank you very much. So this is what we have completed MEG-1, and all the blocks have been completed. So we may meet next time. All your classes, MEG-1 classes are over. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Bye bye. Wish you all the
Thank you so
best.
much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.